This video will walk you through some tips to maximize your score on one of the toughest questions in the IB Business Management syllabus, the 10 marker. So first I'll start with a brief overview of the 10 marker and what to expect. So the 10 marker is an essay-based response which relates to a business recommendation. This means that you have to use a combination of your BM theory and evidence from the case in order to make a judgment as to what a business should do given the situation it faces. In terms of where it shows up, the 10 marker will show up in your paper 1 and paper 2 as part of section B. This goes for both HL and SL students. Additionally, your teacher is most likely including one of these on every unit test or in-class assessment that you have. Now, with that in mind, I'll now go through some of the key considerations that you should have every time you write a 10 marker. Now, the first point is to read the question. Now, this is something that may sound obvious, but we found that many students miss the main focus of the question because they don't read the question carefully. And this can oftentimes lead to an unfocused analysis or a poor structure. Take the time to read and understand the question and also note which part of the BM syllabus the question relates to, as you can use this as the starting point to figure out what type of BM theory you might want to use. The second point is to plan your response. Now, this is something that is understandably overlooked by many students, as they often find that they already don't have enough time to finish their 10 marker. However, we found that spending just 1 to 2 minutes to highlight in bullet points what your key points are going to be and what the evidence you want to use is before you write will help you stay focused in your analysis and will also help you save time, as you will spend less time stopping to think about what you're going to write next. The third point is to always have balanced arguments. Now, the best way to do this is to always have 4 main body paragraphs to ensure a balanced structure. So these 4 body paragraphs should correspond to 2 points for and 2 points against. So take a 10 marker that looks at evaluate whether company X should expand into the Canadian market. There, your 2 points or 2 paragraphs for should be yes, they should expand into the Canadian market with 2 different reasons why they should. And then your 2 points or 2 paragraphs against should be 2 reasons as to why the company shouldn't expand into the Canadian market. So the IB and therefore your teacher will be very particular about students having balanced arguments. As a result, you will lose marks if your arguments are unbalanced, so keep that in mind. Finally, be explicit in linking your theory to the case. Now, the easiest way to do this is to begin by explaining your theory or point and then linking the case context to this point. Similar to your 4 and 6 markers, we highly recommend that you use the PEE plus impact method in every 10 marker body paragraph. In the next slide, I will walk you through how to use this method and provide an example paragraph. So if you aren't familiar with it, the PEE plus impact method or point evidence explain impact method is something that's been borrowed from English essays and is the single best structure that you can use to answer questions in BM. And that goes for your 4 markers, your 6 markers, and all of your 10 marker body paragraphs. So I'll just go through some of the key things to note. Your point is very similar to a topic sentence in an English essay. So you should just be highlighting the main focus of the paragraph. Your evidence is going to be information from the case study to further support your point. Now, one thing to note here is make sure you intentionally select the most appropriate evidence. We see some students who end up copying multiple sentences from the case or quoting the case. This tends to not get credit as it doesn't show intentionality on your part in selecting the evidence. Your explanation is where the analysis happens and you tie the point to the evidence. The top tip here is to be as explicit as possible in your explanation. And so a good way to do this is to really assume that the reader understands nothing about the concepts that you are discussing and that it is your job to walk them through your thinking and link everything together. So really think about how to link everything together for the reader from the perspective of how does A link to B and B lead to C, etc. So really make sure you walk them through every step of your thinking. Finally, on the impact point, this is focused on the impact of the business, and you can think about the impact of the business or impact on stakeholders in this section. So with that, we're going to look at an exemplar paragraph written by a student. And so this was in response to a 10 marker on OVO, which is a hotel company, looking at whether OVO should become a publicly held company. So what I suggest you do is pause the video, take 20 seconds to just skim through the response and see what you think and what stands out to you. Hopefully you've had a chance to do that. And now I'm going to walk you through each part of this response and just note some of the things that you can take away for your own 10 marker. So as we look at the point, right, the point is very clear, very concise, and communicated in one sentence, right? It is rooted in BM theory, and in fact, it looks like something that could come out straight from the textbook. That's totally okay for the point. The key thing here is that it explains to the reader what the focus of the paragraph is going to be. Now, in terms of the evidence, we want to learn more about the company here, right? So this is going to be information that relates to the company and to the point. Here we learn that there's intense competition in the industry. OVO is seeking to undergo major redevelopments, right? And some details on what those redevelopments are, as well as the fact that the developments cost $2 million. This is a good job because the student doesn't just copy from the case. Instead, they sift through to find what are the most relevant pieces of evidence that link to my point. Now, in terms of the explanation, we go back and think about that A leads to B, B leads to C, and walking the reader through their thinking, right? And we see how the student does this in the first sentence of the explanation section. By becoming a publicly held company, OVO is able to gain access to a new source of finance in the form of share capital. So this really is that A leads to B, right? Which they can then use to help fund the development. B leads to C. Very clear example of the student walking the reader through their thinking and their analysis. Now, you might sit there and say, that is kind of implied by the point and evidence, and you would absolutely be right. But for the purposes of this essay, and more generally in the IB, you are never going to be rewarded for implied analysis. You're not going to be given credit for it. Instead, you need to make sure you are explicit and super clear by what you mean. And the best way to do that is to go into more detail and walk the reader through your thinking. Finally, on the impact, we see that the that the student considers the short and long run. Now, this is something that the IB refers to as evaluation skills. If you are someone who is targeting a 7 out of 10 or higher on your 10 marker, this is absolutely something that you should start to implement in your 10 marker because this is required to score at that level. If you're someone who is happy with a 6 out of 10 or below, then you don't need to worry about this evaluation point. You instead would treat the impact section like you would a 4 marker, focusing on as the student has differentiation, USP, brand awareness, etc. Now, finally, I'm going to end with some practical tips on how to practice the 10 marker and what to expect as you go. So the first point is to understand the structure and the content. So one of the most common questions we get while tutoring is, how do you know which questions are going to come up as a 10 marker? So the simple answer is that there are syllabus points that are listed as AO3, and all of those can technically be tested as a 10 marker. Now, if you're watching the review videos or looking at other resources on our website, we will point out what these topics are for you, and we will also note which topics the IB has tended to prefer testing in the past. The next thing is to expect slow progress. Now, the 10 marker is a difficult skill, and it will likely take you multiple attempts and lots of practice to become comfortable in writing a 10 marker. Now, the example that I showed you on the previous slide was from a student who was scoring 7 to 8 out of 10 on their 10 markers. But they also actually started by scoring 3 to 4 on their 10 markers. It was regular practice that helped them get better. So one way to do this is before an upcoming assessment at school or a final exam, we recommend that you write multiple 10 markers to assess where you're at and figure out how you can improve. Finally, you can take this process one step further by simulating assessment conditions. Now, this involves you handwriting your 10 marker and giving yourself the same amount of time that you would have on your actual assessment or the final exam. And of course, there's nothing wrong with typing out your 10 marker as practice. This is very beneficial, but many students find that their hand hurts when writing this essay. What we have found is that students who transition to handwriting their essays early on in the studying process do find that it becomes easier to write the essay in their actual assessment. So if you are able to handwrite your 10 marker early on in your studying process, what we have seen is that there are actual benefits to you when you write the final exam or a test in class because your handwriting speed is better and your hand doesn't tire as fast. So you're more likely to be able to finish your 10-marker essay. If you're looking to further practice your 10-marker skills, we have numerous resources on Diplomaly that can help you with this. This includes a video breaking down the different types of structures that you can take depending on the type of 10-marker you have to answer. This video also includes a paragraph-by-paragraph analysis on what your teacher or final IB examiner will look for when they're grading your introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusion. If you're ready to put these skills into practice, you can go to the case studies part of the website and use the filter to filter by 10-marker. This will give you all of the case studies that have a 10-marker in them. Finally, if you have a test coming up at school or your final IB exam is approaching, head over to our mock exams and practice unit tests, each of which have a 10-marker at the end to help you further practice under assessment conditions. All 10 markers on the website will come with a full-length Level 7 exemplar response, which represents a response from a student who would score a 7 to 8 out of 10 or higher. If you're looking for additional help with your 10 marker or any other part of the course, please feel free to reach out to us via email or via WhatsApp. In the meantime, feel free to check out the resources on diplomaly.org. If this video was useful for you, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions or would like to see us cover any other types of BM content, please let us know in the comment section. Thanks for watching.